You're listening to part 2 of a Dear Applicants podcast episode. Check out last week's episode to listen to part 1 of this interview. So moving on very slightly chronologically to your master's program, why Columbia?
Right. So I've always been fascinated by New York. I love it. I had visited before and I knew that Columbia was pretty much the school for me because it combined city living and campus living together. That was one. And I think Columbia had a really great program in environmental science at the time. So they had the Earth Institute, and I also managed to intern with the Urban Institute. And I think they've also launched some more climate-related institutes since. So they had really strong research in that area of urban studies on climate as well as environmental economics.
Also, tell us about your time there, both at university as well as in New York. I'm a big fan of New York too, by the way.
Right. So my time in Columbia was just around a year because it was a 3-semester long program. So I started in summer and graduated in the following summer. So my time there was pretty exciting. I was able to test out of quite a lot of my core classes in my master's because there was strong overlap with my undergrad. And because of that, I was able to design and use those free credits to study other classes. So that's where I started building out a urban studies kind of like mini specialization for myself. There's no such thing. I just curated a bunch of classes so that, I would say that I have the skills in this particular set. And I also spent a lot more time on urban economics there, working with different professors.
Where did the urban studies interest come in from? I know it was always there, even before you did your undergrad, but having specialized so deeply in environmental science, was this something that was just at the back of your mind? I guess specifically with in terms of thinking about your thesis statement, it does make sense, right? There's a lot of enmeshing or overlapping. Is that why you decided to give it a go? Or was there a completely different academic interest that you had there?
I think it had to do with the fact that I found it very relevant to Singapore policymaking work, knowing that I was going to work in the Singapore government. And so in my third year of undergrad at NUS, I did an internship at the Center for Livable Cities, where I did a lot of research on urban studies at the time. So I felt that would be relevant to my future career.
Okay, got it. And were there any, before the camera started rolling, you told me there were a couple of internships that you did in New York that were particularly interesting.
Yeah, I did. I did several internships. Actually, my time in New York was peppered with a lot of work experience. I really wanted to be...
Was that intentional?
I think it was. I didn't want my time in New York to be just about exploring the city or just doing my coursework. I found that my colleagues were all extremely ambitious because it was a master's program. Everybody had come in with a very strong motivation to find a good job after the master's program.
This was an MPA, right?
Yes, correct. And so there were many more slightly more seasoned colleagues of mine, like in the same course, who had a lot of work experience, and they gave really great career advice and strategic advice about building a portfolio. And it was also a motivation provided by the school itself. They constantly, kind of talked up how we needed to get experience, and it was very important to the administration to make sure that we took it seriously. Yeah. So the internships I worked at was I did one at the Mayor's Office of Resiliency and Recovery. So there I was doing some mapping studies about food resiliency, especially in the wake of hurricanes that had taken down some of the basic infrastructure in different boroughs of New York. So I was trying to map out which boroughs really needed much more support and how much funding they should be given in order to mitigate such disaster crises in the future.
Were there any issues getting that internship as a foreign citizen?
No, not at all.
Okay, and did you apply directly? Was it through the university?
It was through the university. So I spoke earlier about how the administration really focused on making sure we were job ready.
Right.
They provided
they did
lots
their
of
best with sort of making connections.
Correct. There were always like networking sessions all over campus, and they also provided different lists of internships that you could jump onto and apply for. Yeah.
And were there any particular, well, I guess my first question would be, what were the other internships and other research projects that you did? And second, why those in particular? Was there some strategy, or were you like, ooh, this is interesting, that is interesting, this might help later on?
Right. So the other internships I did was with the Urban Institute on campus. So that one, I was a research assistant for a slightly very large project that was about the analysis of sorry, I just made a face. I'm like so small. Please cut this part out.
No.
Okay.
Keep it in.
Yeah.
This is Link NYC?
No, sorry. It was the Columbia
this
Urban
right there,
Institute
okay.
on case studies of different cities and mapping them. So it was a very theoretical, analytical sort of project to figure out how different state and city governments had managed to roll out different or similar policies and what the impact was like.
Okay.
So that was one. Another one that I had kind of stumbled upon accidentally was that I had a project about Link NYC. So if you have visited New York, you may have seen that they have converted their payphone booths into Wi-Fi hotspots.
When did they do this?
A long time ago. So
Clearly
in
not very-
2016, they had them.
Clearly not paying much attention.
Yeah, because they actually now look like signboards. So advertising signboards. So some of them also have additional infrastructure where they would have a screen and there would be a keypad and you can actually go and make calls directly from that little setup. On the side would be advertising, and that's how they would be able to generate revenue.
Okay.
And all of these used to be payphones. So they actually ended up refurbishing them so that the connections that were already made for the payphone booths were not left to go to waste. And this was a collaboration between the city government as well as Alphabet. One sub company of Alphabet, called Intersection. So they had a public-private partnership, very exciting business model, where part of the revenue of the advertising on the side, which also provides things like, oh, what's the weather like today? Or other public service announcements. And also at the same time, you provide public services to individuals who might be walking around who need to make a phone call, and it's broadcasting free Wi-Fi.
Okay. And at the end of your year and a bit in Columbia, actually, before we get there, how did you find New York? This is purely
did I find
a
New
selfish question because I love talking about New York.
I really like New York. In addition to all of the internships I did, I was also running a side passion project of mine where I ran a music blog.
Oh.
So it's a disrupted industry at this point. Back then when blogs were a thing, kids watching this may not know what I'm talking about.
Let's post on TikTok.
Yeah. So tastemaking of music was done through part PR and part people who have good music taste writing about it.
What is good music taste?
Right. So good music taste is whenever people hype it along with you. There used to be a whole ecosystem of music blogs and people would be sharing it around. Part of it is also in the music PR industry. So I was doing that on the side. I ended up having lots of great opportunities to attend music festivals in New York and concerts there. I also did this starting out in Singapore actually. So my network was mostly in Singapore before I moved on to doing this in New York.
And where did the idea come from?
There was no particular thought to it. I was very much keen to capture the kinds of music that I yes, I never posted anything on Musical.ly, which was not so credible. I mean, it is technically like TikTok.
So, what's the state? What was the name of the?
It's called Jump Into Limbo. I used to have a .com for it. I stopped paying for the domain, but it's now a Tumblr. So
so it's still around.
It's still around. You can still check it out. You can also still send me music to review.
What music do you prefer?
I personally prefer electronic music. Sorry, it's very controversial.
I won't be sending anything to Judy. Electronic music, okay. Well, is that mostly what people were sending in, or was it all over?
Yeah, because that was what I was interested in. So I created a little space for myself, reviewing that in kind of like indie electronic scene here in Singapore.
Are you part of it?
Not anymore.
Okay, but you were.
But I was.
Any particular reason why you're out of it?
Oh, I wrote a whole article about how I was shutting down my blog as if it was a startup after 10 years of running it.
Wait. Well, so that's the blog, but are you still part of the scene, I guess?
No, I was part of the scene because I was a writer.
Oh, only because of that. But I mean, electronic music is something that you enjoy anyways, right? So wouldn't you?
I think the question is, what is being part of the scene? Like, I'm not in a PR firm. I'm not like a singer. I don't cover
I think what.
the events.
Oh,
I
okay.
just
We're talking
attend.
about very different things. Oh, you're talking about the more industry organized.
Yes.
Okay. I'm talking about like the grungy underground thing.
Oh, like attending?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I do that sometimes when I'm not working.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
fair enough. Did you monetize the blog at all?
Yeah, I did paid post.
Okay. And was that in any way lucrative?
No.
Oh no! Is this something you?
No, it's a passion project.
Okay, so you would you encourage students to do it? I suppose.
I would say, if you guys have a Head Start at Capstone idea,
Well, we have had students do blogs, yeah. So
Yeah,
Head Start
you
and
could-
Capstone,
you
not
could consider
music
that.
related,
yeah.
but still.
I
yeah.
mean, it's something that helps you polish your skills working with other parts of different stakeholders in the industry. So I had a great network of musicians and artists, and I figured out how to pitch myself. I had a name card, how to do SEO for blogs, which I guess is no longer so relevant.
Bold tells me it is.
So and like looking at social media analytics on the back end, figuring out what converts and what doesn't. I think like a lot of blog related skills are disrupted. I would say a lot of that project is a bit outdated.
Okay.
If I had to redo it again, I would start a TikTok. And I would have trending
It's
songs.
never too late for yet another side hustle. It just end up being you reviewing K-pop songs.
I think
I feel.
it requires a lot more of a physical personality, which I don't think I have. I'm not great at standing in front of a camera and filming myself talking
Doing
about
fine,
it.
isn't she? You're doing
I'm
fine.
not engaging enough to be on TikTok.
Before we continue, I would like to take a quick break to remind you to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve and to reach a wider audience to provide further insight into this arduous journey. Also, if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to email us at our email linked in the description below. We'd love to hear from you.
It's coming to the end of your year in Colombia, and in the spirit of college admissions, what were the major reflections or takeaways from your time in university broadly?
My major reflections from being in Colombia.
NUS as well.
In NUS. Okay. So I think I've gone down the negative side of things of what I should have done instead. Shall we talk about that?
Sure, yeah. Well, always fresh ideas. So welcome.
Okay. So I think if I had to redo my time in Colombia, I would have networked much more in sectors that I didn't directly think that I would work in right away. So I zoomed in so hard on urban studies and on models and urban environmental economics that I didn't really think of the other opportunities that Colombia had. Well, maybe if I hadn't done so many internships, I would have had the time to expand my horizons, because I feel that in the rest of CIPA, School of International Public Affairs at Columbia, there were so many star professors whose classes I could have taken. There was so much more research that I could have done, so many more events that I could have, spoken up in. So it's like regret from not having had the foresight to really expand out of my interest. So I think perhaps that's a side effect of knowing what you wanted to do too early. Yeah.
Deep.
Yeah, but my reflection or the real takeaways from Colombia was definitely I treasure the connections and friendships, as well as a lot of the soft skills I picked up. One of which I reflect often. My current work now is project management skills. We hardly learn about that in school, but we did at Columbia. We have lots of projects that are being done in our school life here in Singapore. And I'm sure people doing the A-levels know project work. I don't know if that's still around. But real project management looks a lot different. It's about thinking of resources. It's about thinking of prioritization. And it's also not just like allocating what to different people, but playing on their strengths. So a lot of these recognition of what our skill sets are, like somebody's strengths versus their weaknesses. And if you were a manager now, you would think about how you would allocate to grow different individuals. So stepping back and reflecting on how projects were done at Columbia versus, how projects are typically thought of is very different. So roles and responsibilities like R&Rs or the RASI framework, like responsibilities, accountability, consulted individuals as well as those informed, are frameworks that we utilized a lot in Columbia to help us think of how collaborations work, how people come together to put together a project, design it, consider the metrics, and then deliver it. So there's like a very set way of doing it, which I think works perfectly most of the time. And it's not something that was talked about very much in my undergrad.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that sets up my next question quite neatly, and you've touched on it already. How would you weigh up the Singaporean education system against that in the US?
Right. So I think the Singaporean education system is pretty much structured. If you have picked your specialization or your major or your degree, you would kind of be set on track. So I suppose that was the same frame of mind that brought me to Columbia, where, you know, I had signed up to do an MPA in environmental science and policy. So that's what I kind of focused and zoomed in on more. But with the US system, there was just so much more flexibility. Design your own courses, pick the courses that you want to do, talk to people, and like, you know, just gather academic credit for something that is not directly meant to be on your plate. So I think that's how I would contrast it.
Okay, cool. And tell us about your time in government. You were there for quite a while, right?
Yes. So I spoke earlier about how I regretted not, exploring more in international public affairs. And that's because my very first job in the government was with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah. So I became a diplomat. And at the same time, I was able to continue with what I had studied in my undergrad and master's. So I was working on climate change negotiations in the International Organizations Directorate in MFA.
Okay. And were you posted anywhere eventually, or?
Yeah. So in that first role, I was working on UN related content. And
was that in New York?
No, I was based here in HQ in Singapore. But we have a New York mission, so we worked very closely with them. I did get to travel to New York almost exactly 1 year after I had graduated. And that was to deliver Singapore's first voluntary national review for the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. That's a very long mouthful. And actually, I think we just delivered on our second voluntary national review here in Singapore, because it's done in a span of, I think, 5 years or so. Yeah. So that was a huge interagency effort where we did a stock take of national initiatives for sustainable development. And so I was part of the delegation together with Minister for Sustainability and Environment, back then called Environment and Water Resources, to deliver this presentation to the UN members. Okay.
And where was your foreign posting?
Right. So after that, I went to New Delhi in India, which actually was a very exciting time. I really enjoyed my posting there. Yeah, so my role there was in the political space.
So you enjoyed your time in New Delhi?
I did. Yes. It's very politically exciting because so in my role, there's loads to cover. There's never a dull day. The political environment changes very quickly. And so my job mostly involved writing political reports and also quite a lot of things around.
You'd completely moved out of environmental policy.
Yes. So in climate change policy, that was considered international organizations related work or multilateral policy. And now it moved into bilateral foreign policy. So our relations with India.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were there during COVID?
Yes, I was there during COVID. And we actually encountered a unique consular crisis, which was that the Indian government had shut down intercity transport. So it was basically a lockdown that was seen all across the world at the time. And we still had Singaporeans in India who needed to go back home. And because the airports had been closed down, we had to charter and repatriate our Singaporeans in flights that we had organized as the embassies and as the High Commission. So
did you stay in India though, or were you on one of those repatriation
No, I was not repatriated. So we had to stay on site to take care of Singaporeans who either chose not to return to Singapore or any other developments that would be happening on the ground. Yeah, so it was a choice as well to stay.
Cool. And is the government something that you want to move back into? Are you a tech now? You're a tech bro, tech sis?
Yeah, I'm in tech now.
Well, I think from everything that you've told me and told us today, you seem like someone who's got their hands full, right? Quite busy, too busy to start up their music blog or music TikTok again. Why work with IvyPrep?
I am really keen to help folks with not just like preparing for university, but also like directing them in, or like keeping their minds open for possible career opportunities. I think for me, I was always very focused. I always felt like I knew what I wanted to do, but I really benefited from having mentors in my entire life. So I had mentors at my university professors, and friends who had made pivots as well out of government into other roles. I had mentors in like peer mentors, as well as mentors who I really looked up to. And I feel like IvyPrep does provide some of that within their services.
I think thank you for sharing that, and of course, it's a massive pleasure having you at IvyPrep. I guess to close things off, is there anything that you'd like to talk about, or any parting words that you have for our viewers or listeners? She blinks her eyes in panic.
I don't have any words of wisdom at this moment, but I guess if I would sum up what I had just spoken about, it would be to really keep your options open, like zoom in, but also don't be set on what you want to do. So for me, I had a very circuitous route throughout all of my experiences, but I also had a very fruitful journey through all of them. So it's great to keep your mind open. Don't be afraid to pivot. You know, there's always like smaller stepping stones towards a different direction that you may want to go towards. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being so transparent with us, right? And then giving us so much great stuff. I think there were a lot of amazing stories over there. Thank you very much. Been wonderful having you today. And thank you as well, students and parents. Tell us how you found the new career series. If this is something that you're interested in, we can do this more and more. So do let us know your thoughts in the comments on whatever platform you are watching. And if you're on Spotify, then maybe just drop us a message. But thank you, and see you next time. That's all for today's episode of Dear Applicants. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you found the content valuable and insightful. If you'd like to learn more about our guests or the topics we discussed, be sure to check out our show notes for links and further resources.